Okay, thanks everyone for joining us, and it's certainly been a wonderful day so far, day one of this conference. I know that we've all been thoroughly filled with great information, insights, and new networks on youth. My name is Novia McKay. I'm here paneling or chairing this session on behalf of the United Nations Development Program. And because we have a tight schedule for this session, I'm going to get right into it. I'm pleased today to introduce our panelists who will be speaking on youth in governance, specifically civic partnerships and accountability. Very significant and very important topic for youth today. And without any further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, who is Mr. Jason Francis. Jason is a past president of the Barbados Youth Development Council and former interim chairman of the Caribbean Regional Youth Council. Jason, can you join us, please?
Good evening to everyone, and thank you for having me. Okay. All right, so my task this evening is to just share with you some of the findings from a short research paper between myself and a former lecturer at the University of West Indies, well, former lecturer of mine at the University of West Indies. And we're exploring the idea of participatory governance and youth, the shift from full to partial state funding of students' university education in Barbados. Right? And the person who assisted in this research was Dr. Kristina Hinds-Harrison. She couldn't be here. She's actually in Peru representing the Barbados in hockey. So I'm going to start by looking at the whole idea of the social partnership. In Barbados, back in 1993, we were going through an IMF program, and the idea was, how do we, bring all the actors together? How do we ensure that we come out of this program and actually have a better Barbados? So what was proposed at the time was this whole idea of the social partnership. That social partnership included, you had representatives from the labor movement, you had representatives from the private sector, and of course government. And the social partnership has been seen as a best practice, more or less, in good governance. Now, apart from that, the other issue now is, so if you aren't part of government, you aren't part of the trade union movement, you aren't part of the private sector, how do you have a voice beyond elections? And one of the areas, or one of the key communities across the country, which clearly has not had a significant voice, is the youth sector. In 2013, now just to give you a bit of a background, for those who've gone to UE and who've interacted with Barbadian students, you would know perhaps that Barbadian students fully funded by government in terms of their tuition. It has almost been seen as a birthright for Barbadian students from the 1960s onwards. However, in 2013, in its budgetary proposals, the government decided, hey, we can't continue funding tertiary education full scale. So what we're going to do is to introduce a tuition fee of 20%. However, the issue which we're exploring today is, yes, you've introduced the fee, all right? Yes, it may seem reasonable, but you have not consulted the main persons who are going to be affected by this fee, and those persons are your young people, particularly between the ages of 16 to 29. Education has been a key plank in Barbados' development, along with other things such as free health care, subsidized transport, and so on. But it has helped to put Barbados, for a period of time, at the top of the Caribbean in terms of the Human Development Index ranking. So what we've decided to do, we decided to engage youth leaders, all right, by using semi-structured questions. We used interviews, and we more or less looked at getting some in-depth information from these youth leaders in terms of, were you consulted in terms of this policy? What impact has the policy had on your youth groups? What impact do you see it having on youth across the country? And what is the general level of engagement in policy making by the government as it pertains to young people? From what we've learned, none of the youth leaders were consulted. And I'm just going to mention some of these youth leaders quickly. You had a former CARICOM youth ambassador, you had persons in the National Youth Council, the president of the Guild of Students at UEKFL, well, the former president, the president of the Barbados Community College Guild of Students, and you also had someone who was involved in the youth movement and who sat on the National Youth Policy Planning Committee. So some of the key things highlighted in, I'm colorblind, but I think that's purple. There was no consultation prior to or after the announcement. Government knew where to find hundreds of young people 4 years before when it wished to launch its national youth policy. However, there was no consultation when it made a decision to increase tuition fees. The Guild of Students lobbied the government of Barbados for a meeting, unsuccessfully, until it engaged the head of the leading trade union in Barbados. In other words, that was the only way they managed to get a meeting with the government. The state of youth participation in decision making. When there's actual consultation, it tends to be face value. Young people actually do sit on committees. However, what they've stated is these committees already have their own agenda set up, and there's no way in ensuring that if you make a recommendation, that recommendation is actually implemented. So again, it comes across as kind of tokenistic. Young people are considered and treated as an insignificant factor in Barbados, except when elections are pending. And this relates to our ability, or their ability, because I no longer consider myself youth, to be involved in the decision-making process. And the implications of this policy, a growing sentiment among young Barbadians that government no longer cares, that government has abandoned its philosophical and ideological moorings, i.e. its social democratic principles, which it founded the country on. And the impact of the policy, a significant fall off in numbers. I think the numbers plummeted from 8,000 in 2012 to about 4,000 this year. When I went to UEKFL, you could hardly find a park, you could hardly find space in the library. Now it's like a ghost town. And I say that if, there's actually so. Many young people have dropped out to seek work because they cannot afford it. Dropping out does not guarantee you're going to get a job. So you're both unemployed and you can't get an education. There's greater competition for space at tertiary institutions, such as the technical and vocational institutions. So you have persons who are gifted academically now going into the tech voc area. And that is something government hasn't considered. And the young person from the low-income community is now immobilized. They can't climb the social ladder. They believe that the ladder has been kicked down. And I examine some of the other perspectives in youth and governance. Berthin, 2005, stresses that there's a region-wide dissatisfaction with governance. In other words, we have a system which is closed, distant, and authoritarian. The CCYD report, often young people are touted as the future, but seldom consulted on matters which affect their lives, especially those of national significance. And Terri-Ann advises that unless drastic steps are taken to bolster and renew democratic character and institutional capacity, political and social system, states in the Caribbean will collapse. To summarize, and looking back at what some of the intellectuals in the CCYD report have said, there's clear evidence of a lack of consultation with young Barbadians. Young people desire to be a part of the policy-making process. They wish to contribute their ideas and alternative suggestions to key policy matters. However, there's been a top-down, authoritarian, and dismissive attitude, and it has had a significant effect on young people in Barbados. So what is to be done? A greater effort should be made to empower young people and to have more direct involvement in the governance process. It was done in 2011, 2012, when the National Youth Policy was being created. there's no way that government lost all of those names in 2013 when it came to implementing the raising tuition fees. From the young people themselves, we need to be more radical, or they need to be more radical, more informed, and more organized. And we heard today the whole idea of you have to be aware, you have to listen more, to read more. So in order to take action, young people need to be more informed. If they weren't watching the budget back then, they certainly are watching the budget now, the budget and the budgetary and the financial proposals. And the last, again, from one of my favorite Caribbean scholars, Mr. Boudin, the political system needs to become more inclusive, responsible, and accountable, thereby empowering and encouraging young people to participate effectively while adapting to the challenges of globalization. So in essence, the policy, the implementation of the 20% tuition fees, it showed that the process of good governance wasn't followed, and Barbados has had a further slide in terms of that apathy among young people and a belief that government and the political system can work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jason. I won't delay, and I'll introduce now Nick Francis. He's the president of the Young Democrats, the youth arm of the New Democratic Party in St. Vincent. Thank you. Help me in welcoming Nick to the stage, please.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to be very quick because time is of the essence. My name is Nick Francis, and despite the gray hairs on my head, I am only 28 years old. I was born here in Jamaica, but my parents moved to St. Vincent and Grenadines when I was just a baby, so I am Jamaican-born, Vincentian raised, still home away from home. So, all right, I decided to write a paper on my experiences as a young person in the political arena and in youth advocacy. So this is my reflective piece, Youth in Governance, a Radical Approach. Oh, okay. My paper at a glance, the tokenistic engagement of youth in the Caribbean, the importance of youth participation in decision-making and its implications to youth sustainable development. I also make a call for a shift in the political environment, favoring young people, and I also propose a regional model to increase youth participation in decision-making and the advancement of the youth agenda. Defining youth and defining youth participation, oftentimes you find in the literature that some consider youth to be a period of transition, while others look at it as an age range. So in writing this paper, I decided to do my own working definition, which is youth can be described as any person between the ages of 15 and 35 who is actively engaged in a period of transition and development from childhood to full adulthood, evidenced by self-actualization and personal and financial independence. And I use the definition put forward by Farthing, 2012, who defined youth participation as a process where young people as active citizens take part in, express views on, and have decision-making power about issues that affect them. The tokenistic engagement of youth in the Caribbean. In my discussion on the tokenistic engagement of youth, I first highlighted some of the frameworks and mechanisms that are already in place to facilitate youth participation in decision-making. Some of these are the UNCRC, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which speaks to the importance of citizenship participation for self and community development, the Charter of Civil Society in CARICOM, national youth policies, we spoke about that earlier today, and of course the Commonwealth Youth Program, which was established to work towards a society where young men and women are empowered to develop their potential, creativity, and skills as productive and dynamic members of their societies and participate fully at every level of decision-making and development, both individually and collectively, promoting Commonwealth values of international cooperation. However, while such frameworks exist in our region, significant factors contribute to the tokenistic engagement of youth in the region. We have prevailing socio-cultural influences undermining the effectiveness of these frameworks. For example, children must be seen and not heard. Labeling of youth as lazy, problematic, inexperienced, and unlearned create a barrier to the true expression of the youth voice. In my discussion on this topic, I referenced the work of Nadim Kara, who categorized the tokenistic engagement of youth in the following ways. Sentimentally stalled, emotional connections to adult allies constrains youth from offering critical feedback. Subtly squelched, this refers to situations where adults who do not have a sincere interest in meaningful youth involvement can implement a token model but pass it off as a meaningful one because there is no consistent way for either internal or external observers to assess their models, and subconsciously subverted. In this case, youth are given the freedom and autonomy to organize themselves but end up replicating the forms and patterns of past youth involvement models that are not highly participatory. I also specifically addressed our youth parliaments in the region as an example of this tokenistic engagement. These bodies are mainly ceremonial and lack tangible mechanisms to inform or create and present legislation. I reference an article from 2008 in which members of the Jamaica Youth Parliament called on the government to give legitimacy to that body. I also describe youth parliaments in the region as national spectacles, where youth are paraded as promising leaders rather than equal partners in national development. We pale in comparison to the UK Youth Parliament, which has a democratic electoral process, specialized training for participants and consultants, and consultations with government ministers and opposition spokespersons. Members of the UK Youth Parliament also create national manifestos to inform the youth cohort of updated plans and accomplishments. Equally important in youth participation in decision-making are adult-youth partnerships. A number of government and non-governmental organizations lack strong ties between the adults and youth, and because they lack these strong ties, it impedes the progress of these organizations. We also have an academic and social elitism, with which I spoke about earlier. The achievements of youth in academia must be applauded and encouraged. However, this does not negate the rights of school dropouts, juvenile delinquents, youth with disabilities, and youth from poor socio-economic backgrounds, from giving voice to the issues which impact their lives and their ability to sustain a livelihood. What should be done? Employ youth advocacy to achieve political influence in favor of the youth agenda. Youth must be equipped with the important skills in forming strategic alliances, collaborating effectively with like-minded individuals, groups, and organizations, and building advocacy networks to increase support for youth-centered programs and policies. Radical practice. This will involve challenging and confronting individuals and organizations that reinforce barriers to youth participation and the social exclusion of youth. Such activities prove difficult if executed within a legislative vacuum. Therefore, a push towards enacting and updating national youth policies across the region will prove beneficial in legitimizing and facilitating youth participation in nation building. The political situation. I have some pictures here from my own activity as the president of the Young Democrats and my colleagues there. In that group pictured below, you would see where we launched our ReReady app. We are one of the first political parties to launch an app that encourages voter registration among young people in the Eastern Caribbean. The political situation. Youth in politics is necessary for the advancement of the Caribbean region. Youth must be incorporated in decision-making in a world impacted by increasing globalization and vulnerabilities to external shocks. However, youth are embattled by adults in authoritative positions who seek to exclude them from participating meaningfully in decision-making. This, coupled with bureaucratic red tape, has significantly reduced interest in the political environment among youth. Additionally, one must also investigate the increasing passivity among the youth population in the region. A deeper investigation of this passivity would reveal that there is need for education reform across our region to increase citizenship participation among this cohort. So I advanced this regional model, and in this model, I propose 3 sections: education reform, youth advocacy and radical practice, and the support of public opinion. If one were to ask a classroom of Form 3 students what would be the career of their choice, I would estimate that very few of them would say that they want to be a member of parliament or a policymaker. Though this is a simple example, this reveals a failure to orient our young people to the importance of citizenship, political participation, and social responsibility. Such attributes are prerequisites for effective representation in governance. The introduction of civics as a subject at all levels within our education systems must therefore be prioritized. Today's youth have greater access to information and social networks which encourage dialogue, analysis, and reflection on the role of governance in the lives of youth. These media provide a forum for youth to gain their voice, for the youth voice to gain wide reach among multiple demographics. Youth must also utilize their political power to lobby policymakers in supporting legislative reforms to progress the youth agenda. Facilitating the youth voice in decision-making will require a sustained level of social activism. There must be a direct confrontation of the tokenistic engagement of youth through protest action and a regional online advocacy campaign to raise awareness about issues affecting the youth population, to combat the social exclusion of youth and place public pressure on governing bodies to include the youth in decision-making. And through the theory of diffusion, we'll be able to gain the support of public opinion to advance the youth agenda. Thank you for listening.
Jamaicans from West Kingston have given so much to the world in areas such as sports and the arts. The communities of Denham Town, Fletcher's Land, Hannahtown, and Tivoli are now in urgent need of rejuvenation and social transformation. The May 2010 two-day security operations in Tivoli woke up all Jamaicans at home and in the diaspora.
Them live in school and they have no work. Them need to get some work. And them parents need to sit with them and talk to them. Most parents of them sit down with them child and talk to them. They feel say them put on the gun. 14-year-old, 15-year-old, 16, and them are dead. And them are doing shooting.
You know, try to help, to support them in some ways, because there's a lot of family there. It's hard to get a job because when you say you come from Tivoli.
Youngsters in West Kingston are forced to deal with high incidence of crime and violence and lack of decent work opportunities. They are part of the worrying 34% unemployed Jamaican youth. One of the 17 global goals that make up the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is goal number 8, which promotes the inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all.
But when you're poor, it's like a crime, like a prisoner doing time. Said the rain can't come to stay.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica has provided a community renewal framework for programs such as USAID's Comet, the Ministry of Security's Unite for Change, and the Citizen Security and Justice Program. UNDP's Justice Undertakings for Social Transformation project in the critical area of democratic governance has also been guided by this framework. The first proposed pillar is to support the implementation of the recommendations coming out of the Commission of Inquiry. UNDP has already been involved in strengthening transparency and accountability by facilitating a media sensitization workshop on the Commission of Inquiry and coordinated a human rights training workshop for resident magistrates. UNDP is proposing renewable energy solutions so community members may enjoy healthier lives. Key mechanisms for guaranteeing the success of the Rejuvenating Communities program will include crowdfunding sources, contributions from Jamaican rich culture, and support from traditional and non-traditional donors. Let us rejuvenate all vulnerable communities.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I thought I would bring forward a bit the youth in the art section and just incorporate that into our presentation. My name is Rachel Morrison. I'm presenting on behalf of our Deputy Resident Representative, Dr. Elsie Laurent Chenoun, who unfortunately was not feeling well enough to join us today. So as the substitute, I know that a lot will be expected of me, and hopefully I can perform and score. All right. So we're going to talk about our Rejuvenating Communities project that is currently under development at UNDP. Before I start that, though, for those of you who probably aren't too familiar with us, UNDP works in 177 countries globally, and in Jamaica, like elsewhere, our three main focus areas are democratic governance and peace building, sustainable development, climate, and disaster resilience, right? Now, these are just a list of various programs and projects that we have under the Democratic Governance and Peace Building section. And the Rejuvenating Communities project that is currently under development will, of course, fall under this programmatic area. Now, I don't know if any of you have gotten a chance to look at our booth downstairs, but we are currently promoting the new set of SDGs, right? Because this is what is supposed to be driving the agenda globally for the next 15 years. We understand, however, that locally there are other important considerations to be made for small island developing states, as well as countries like Jamaica that tend to be highly indebted poor countries, middle-income countries, actually. Now, in terms of the SDGs, and the different areas that we can pull from. In the video, you saw us look at the area related to employment, but also, particularly when it comes to issues of security and justice, you also have SDG, I'm skipping ahead, didn't realize that, sorry, SDG Goal 11 and 16, right? And this is just, I mentioned these because I want us to start thinking in terms of what the work that we're doing on the ground locally in countries, they do link back to the broader global objective, right? So of course we need to always bear that in mind where we're sort of placing ourselves. And our broader work in UNDP covering citizen security and social cohesion would of course be aligned to these global goals going forward. Now, having said that, the Rejuvenating Communities project, what we're looking at here is basically looking to entrench the core principles of social cohesion as a critical component when addressing issues related to community renewal, right? We feel that this is an element that has been lacking, and of course we feel like it is very important in order to foster change and transformation within inner city communities. Earlier in the presentation, we spoke about the three main pillars in the video that we're planning to cover under this project. And of course, one of the very important ones that we're looking at is trying to establish trust in the community between the political, direct political leadership, community institutions, and the government, right? Another key focus area for us is going to be the efficient delivery of services to meet the unmet needs of the community. And then, of course, the third pillar, which is part of the reason why we wanted to present here at this conference, has to do with youth engagement and ensuring that youth are engaged in addressing social development challenges. To this end, what we're hoping to achieve as a result of initiating a project like this is to ensure that incidents like the 2010 Tivoli incursion cannot reoccur in the Jamaican space. We also want to ensure that the current recommendations that will come out of the Commission of Inquiry are going to be implemented. This project, in fact, was actually envisioned to have started at some point this year. But of course, that's not going to happen because we know that the current ongoing Commission of Inquiry has been delayed. And as a result of that, we're going to have to wait in terms of our implementation. But it's very important that citizens do not feel that commissions of inquiry are just talk shops. It's important for them to see that what comes out of these are actually tangible results leading to change. So we're hoping to be supporting those the implementation of those recommendations. Now, finally, of course, addressing the entrenched socio-economic problems of inner city communities, and primarily among these are issues related to youth employment, youth empowerment. For us, the catalyst for change within these communities is going to come from the young people. It cannot come from anywhere else. So, we have some questions that we want you to help us answer. And we're going to be here over the next 3 days, but we really need to find out, basically, in terms of this Rejuvenating Communities concept and project that we're looking to be working in, we need your input in terms of how we should focus, right? A lot of you have been working in communities for a number of years with young people, with the youth development groups. Okay, I just saw time up, so I need to speed it up. But we would like your feedback, right? Let us know where you think we should focus in and whether or not you think we're heading in the right direction, right? Also, another important thing is how do we get young people energized to be a part of community transformation, to be the catalyst for change? We want to hear your suggestions on that, right, as well. And we have a booth downstairs for the next 3 days. You've met my colleague, Novia, McKay. You've met me. There are other members of our team. Come and talk to us. Come and talk to us about the best way to approach change in communities and putting youth at the center of what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rachel. I'll introduce now Dr. Terri-Ann Gilbert Roberts, Research Fellow at the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies at the University of the West Indies, where she currently chairs the 50/50 Youth Research Cluster and participates in the cluster on regional integration. And I have to say that she is also the leading driver behind this whole conference that we have today. So I'm very happy and grateful that we'll be hearing from her directly about an initiative that's close to her heart and one that UNDP also promotes in the region, having to do with youth in social accountability. So please let's welcome Dr. Gilbert Roberts.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Sorry, my throat is a little parched. What I wanted to propose this afternoon has come about because of some work that we've been doing in our 50/50 youth cluster that's driven by a main question, which is how can Caribbean youth keep governments accountable for implementing the Sustainable Development Goals? And if I would go through my entire presentation, I would have tried to answer these sub-questions. What are our goals for governance of development? What is social audit, which is the proposal I'm making as the tool for engaging young people in keeping governments accountable? How are citizens currently experiencing governance and development? What are the prospects in our region for this social audit movement to emerge, and where should we start? This is my point of departure. These are some of the goals that we have set for ourselves internationally and regionally. And what you see these goals, goal number 16 of the SDGs and goals number 5 and 6 have in common is that they speak to a core issue of accountability, transparency, legitimacy of governance, democratic governance, that is, participatory forms of governance. And I believe that it is time for young people to find a way to engage in democratic governance in ways that are independent of the fora that have been established for them. And that is why I propose a social audit. And social audit really is a process for promoting transparency and accountability in a system of democratic governance. It's a way of tracking, monitoring what is happening in public policies. I'm sure you've heard of a financial audit before, but a social audit is a little bit different. It goes beyond just financial expenditure. It could look at a process. How was a public policy formulated? How is it being implemented? How is it being monitored or evaluated? And it's based on this premise. Citizens, young citizens, older citizens want to know, and importantly, have the right to know what their government does, how it does it, how what it does has an impact on the lives of citizens, and the state must be accountable to its citizens. And a social audit process would allow one to do that. Let me just go through quickly, I'll flash it on the screen, but I won't go through everything. But there's some strengths and challenges of a social audit approach. The strength is that it's an evidence-based approach of engaging with democratic governance. We're not just talking in a forum about what we think is happening in government or our perceptions of what's happening. We do our research and we investigate what is happening. It's not about trying to obstruct the process of governance or public policy making, but seeking to strengthen it. How can we find solutions to improving the public policy process? And importantly, unlike maybe a financial audit where an expert goes in and they sit in a room and on their own they go through the financials, this involves collaboration. It involves citizens coming together from different walks of life to work together to monitor this process. There are some challenges that we have to take note of, the competencies that we have in terms of doing this research, whether we are attuned to working collectively as opposed to individually. I heard a lot of young people speaking this morning about an individualist culture that has emerged. And there's also the issue of partisan political opportunism. If I were to launch a social audit of a particular initiative today in Jamaica, we're in election season, and if I were to find some things that I wasn't completely happy with, and I made that public and I said, people, we need to monitor what's happening, we need the government to do better, I'm sure a member perhaps of an opposition party would jump in and say, you see, this is what we were saying. And my social audit process, which was really something for all Jamaicans, regardless of political party affiliation, would now perhaps be hijacked by a partisan process. And there's some opportunities, but I can speak to that before I end. But I thought it would be important to think about, if I'm proposing this process of a social audit, how likely is this social audit to emerge? What kind of context are we living in? How are people currently experiencing governance? In the region, we know that there are high levels of perception that there are high levels of corruption in the region, although the level of actual victimization is perhaps a little bit lower. There's low level of trust, particularly at local government level. There are moderate to low levels of satisfaction with various aspects of public policy, whether the way we run the economy, or road infrastructure, or public schools, or health services, and so on. And yet, only 1 in 10 people in the Americas had ever attended a local government meeting when this survey was taken. So we're unsatisfied, but then we don't engage in the processes. And this suggests then that the formal processes like a municipal meeting or a local government council meeting are not meeting our needs. We don't want to go there. Maybe the agenda isn't transparent, or we feel the people are running the process have so much control over the agenda that we don't have a point to enter. And so we need to look at, and here I would have broken down, I would have gone through some statistics here with you about how young people are experiencing governance. And what I found was, for young people 18 to 29, their experiences and their predispositions to participation in governance not different from the adults. They too have very low levels of participation, as Nick, I think, was saying in his presentation. Never attended a community meeting, don't engage in protests, don't get involved in community improvement meetings at all. So they need something else. And I'm proposing the social audit because young people still believe that democracy is the best form of governance. They want to have a participatory form of governance, but they're not satisfied with where we are now. The prospects, so I mentioned this already, young people aren't different from others, but this is what we have in place that could help us move towards a social audit movement. We have in at least 12 CARICOM member and associate member states access to information and transparency legislation that protect our rights to know what government is doing and to get access to the documentation in order to enable us to monitor what governments are doing. Secondly, we have a wide range of regional and national youth networks and civil society networks that are already engaged in work on anti-corruption, transparency, accountability. And if we were to work together, I think we could enhance the impact we make. And finally, we actually have some operational resources. Over the last 3 or 4 years, members of 50/50 Youth have trained over 120 youth social auditors in 13 countries. And so they're out there. And there are also grants available to support, currently, to support this type of activity. So there's prospect. There's some prospect, even though the environment is one in which we're moving away from collective, but I think there's enough for us to harness. So I'll just end by offering some points on where I think we possibly could start. And I raise them as questions because I think this is what we have to discuss. How are we in, for example, the education system and training institutions like the university, preparing young activists with a requisite blend of skills for objective research and passionate activism, both of which will be required in a social audit process? What do we know about the processes influencing the formulation and implementation of our national youth policies? Have we ever investigated what's happening there? What do we know about the functioning of our national youth councils, parliaments, or youth organizations? Have we investigated what is happening there? What do we know about the public expenditure in these areas on the youth policies, in our national youth councils, and in other areas? For example, labor market participation in public works projects. Often, particularly around election seasons, we hear about a lot of young people getting jobs. How many jobs, which young people, how long, what was the duration of the assignment and so on? Have we investigated those? Do we know what's happening with our community, national and regional trust funds where you pay a portion of your salary every month and then how is that money spent? Do you know? And finally, maybe constituency development funds in your area. Adrian laughs. How is that money being spent in the constituency where you live? Those, I think, are some of the things that we could perhaps start with if we were to think independently, rather than waiting for somebody to invite me to participate in democratic governance. Why don't we work together to begin to investigate what is happening in terms of government action and then decide how we will help to make recommendations to improve governance for ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think our presenters really covered a wide range, both from identifying what are some of the issues, tokenism, a lack of really trusting and valuing youth participation, all the way to asking questions of our audience and proposing solutions. For example, the social auditing tool as another method for increasing the engagement of young people in governance. And we have time for about one round of questions or comments. So I would encourage anyone in the audience to please just indicate if you'd like to make a comment or question, and think about in your response any other solutions, suggestions, or even examples that you may have for how we can better integrate youth into governance. So I see we have, could you just stand and come here to the center, please? We'll take 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll take 5. So if we have one more person, just join that gentleman down there. So please join these young ladies in the center, and then we'll take your comments or questions. And if I could ask you, thank you so much, to quickly just introduce yourself and keep your question or comment as concise and to the point as possible. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sdg Goal. I'm Jamaican. Well, you said concise and to the point. I have several. For one, Nick, you mentioned that youths are between 15 and 35, right? I was surprised that all morning I've been listening for this, that nobody thought about integrating the educating of youths in the school system. We know this sponge years for children is between 1 to 7. Our children are not as naive as they used to be then. So I would say don't engage children at 15 to 18. We should start at the sponge years. The homes were mentioned. I would not focus on it. Because in Jamaica we know that the parenting skills are not there. We have a lot of illiterate parents who are there and not able to educate the children. The school is the second home to the child. I would say we have 3 systems in the school that we could use. We could use the curriculum, the PTA, or even the extracurricular activities to implement and educate children about governance. Because if we start there, I think it's way better because we are creating leaders from the young age. Not when they're molded in their ways, we're trying to change them at 15, yes. 14. Right? Precise. Another thing is that we're not very proactive. Now, the Prime Minister from British recently visited us, and what he's proposing is to build prisons. We're not looking at solutions. We're waiting until the problem exists for us to solve them. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Camille Bryson, Jamaica. I am really here to address the presentation that the representative from UNDP made in regards to rejuvenating communities.
Sure.
And I must say that I'm really speaking from a very passionate place because of personal experience and because of being an actual product of Tivoli Gardens. Now, a lot of attention is being paid to the 2010 occurrence, but nothing has been done or said about 2001. Now, I experienced 2001 and I literally ran from the community from that time. I'm young. At that time, I was about to embark on my CXCs. Police had to escort me out because I was adamant to bring the CXCs. Anyway, long story short, one of the things we need to understand is that, as Sidonie had mentioned, in tackling the problems in the communities, inner cities, we need to start from a young age. We need to get the children from a young age to understand that they are valuable. They are important. Empower them from young. And I say that because oftentimes the children in these communities attend schools in those communities. And when teachers really go there, at my time when I was going there, it's a matter of trying to get through the day safely. It's not a matter of going outside the curriculum, because you're trying to teach, yes, but you're trying to siphon shots at the same time. So we need children from a young age to understand that it doesn't matter where you are from, what situation you're in, you can get yourself out. No, there are not many persons that might be like a Camilla or Adrian that has been in these communities and have moved on. Major might be there still, I don't. But one of the things that counseling is a very great part of resolving these personal things that we have withhold, because it took a long time for persons who have experienced these kind of things. For me, for example, 2001, a very long time, and self-will to actually get over these things. Earlier this morning, Thompson, he mentioned that leadership is not just acting from a leadership position, but it's the passion, the personal passion to get a task done. Now, before now, I've been quiet about my past or even saying that I'm from the community. One, because of shame. Attending high school was outside the community. A high school that Jamaicans consider elite high school. Now, it was between two extremes, from their community to an elite school. You have to work twice as hard to show that, because you're stigmatized. Even leaving high school and entering the workplace, you're considered to be persons who are gun women, thief, nothing good. So you really have to work twice as hard. So one of the things that we need to do is it's not going to be completely removed, but we have to try to remove the elitism. We have to try to remove the segregation. We have to try to remove that kind of, if the person has an ability, allow them to exercise their capabilities and abilities rather than stigmatizing and stereotyping them based on their address.
Thank you so much for that personal story. Adrian?
I'll be very brief. I'm glad, what's your name? Miss
Camilla.
I'm glad you mentioned the 2001 factor in your community, because the impact is that 35 persons died in that particular, approximately 35. And and I witnessed it because I had to, from Civic Gardens, I had to be transported through that particular area, and I've been diverted to go to high school. I was in second form at the time. So, and during that particular incursion, you could literally, in 2001, in 2010, from Civic Gardens, 3 miles out, you could see smokes, plumes of smokes and the flames. And I remember the helicopters in both instances coming to Civic Gardens saying that persons from Tivoli were being hidden out by members of Civic Gardens. So I just wanted to link that to when Terri-Ann mentioned social audit. And I'm thinking, memory. Does everybody is creating a big hullabaloo about 74 persons dying in the last incursion, not remembering the 35 that died before. So it's more than 100 persons that have died in that particular community. Memory. Do a social audit. And then my other point, I'm going to another extreme. I hear the negative side of individualism and this individualistic culture, but then there's a positive side. I was an individual who decided to become a youth advocate. So I need to ask, what? Now let's focus on the positive side of individualism. Because all through time in my community development work, the individual wants to start a business, but the individual is now being told by donors when he's seeking grants to go through a group. And then the group abandons that individual to do all the work and then does not benefit. So I need to think about myself. I wasn't thinking about myself to develop myself as an individual first. It does not make any sense I try to develop others. It's like or popular saying, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach him to fish and you feed him for life. Now, if I did not develop for myself the skill of fishing, then I can never pass that on to the next generation. So I implore you, think about the individual. So when I come to you with my business plan, think about funding me and asking me, so in your business plan, do you think about doing an apprenticeship program? Little things like that. And when Terry mentioned Constituency Development Fund, when I was thinking about developing myself with my own business plan by asking a member of parliament to help me, right? Constituency, I was told budgetary constraints. It's a buzzword.
Thank you.
Wow. I almost forgot what I was about to say. Well, let me see what I remember though.
Hold on, can you give us your name first?
Oh,
Tell us who you are.
Jazeel Clark.
Hi, Jazeel.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, it was Nick who made mention to. I commend you, Nick, for the move that your organization took in getting youth more involved in exercising their democratic right to first registering as voters and exercising that. But Nick, what we have a problem with is the fact that I don't think it really makes sense for us really to being able to vote, legitimately being registered voters, yes, and we have the same issues being perpetuated. I believe that while we place emphasis on having persons being registered as voters, there should be another emphasis placed on ensuring that who we vote in are persons, are leaders living up and exercising the thing how it's supposed to be, because that is what we really have a problem with. I don't think it really makes sense that we're trying to break the cycle here and then another thing on the other side is being perpetuated. Let's, let them have a connection. So this is another thing that we could look into. Also, I'm not sure if we're aware of the drum major instinct. Right? I think it was Martin Luther King who spoke about the drum major instinct, where individuals tend to want to be seen and they do things because of self-actualization, so to speak. Nothing is wrong with that. Yes, but what is wrong is when we confine that thing to ourselves. Yes, we can achieve and acquire wealth and all these things, but it should be a case where we look beyond our mallet and find means and way how to assist our brothers and help them to get from point A to point B and things like that. That was just my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll be very brief. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Xander Daisy, and I am from the island of St. Lucia. Okay, I haven't been very present today, but as late as I did notice that there wasn't much mentioned by the members of the audience about the failing war on drugs. And I think that right now, this is one of the roots destroying our homes. You mentioned our young men, in the education system being sidelined, because I think that a lot of fathers are imprisoned for trying to feed their families innocently. And I'm going to call it innocently, because right now we have the University of the West Indies, where I attend, starting their own plantation. I find it's a bit of hypocrisy, and at the end of the day, everybody suffers. Because when we frustrate I wouldn't say poor, but there's people in the lower echelons of society, when we frustrate them, they're going to frustrate us. And I shouldn't say us, but everybody is going to be frustrated. So I mean, we're all youth advocates in here, and we shouldn't be afraid to, stand up and look at things for what they really are. I think that, we don't really necessarily agree with what's being said, but just following from the bigger nations like the United States. The United States is legalizing it slowly, and now they have Bob Marley's face on marijuana. You understand? So why are we marginalizing and punishing our own people? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna take you. Go ahead. Yes. Last comment, and then we'll have a response from our panelists.
Yes, my name is Nate Robinson from Jamaica. I just want to talk about a question that I think touches on all the presentations, and it is about the socio-economic, cultural, and historical context of the Caribbean as a prevailing issue that is touching on the issue of participation, the accountability, and everything. For example, the case that Jason mentioned, had it not been for the changing situation with Barbados in terms of the economics, would they not have probably, they were on a particular path, then the conditions around them, the economic ones in this case, changed drastically in them, and it forced a particular kind of response to how they saw participation. So to my mind, I'm wondering if the condition that you're in, to what extent does that have a relationship? Same with the social audit. So you're in a condition where you have a two-party government. That's a prevailing condition. We didn't cause it to be so. So you drop the social audit tool in the middle. And it struggles to work, even though it's a good tool, because of our context that we are in this two-party system. And in the case of Tivoli, that's just a given as well. So we have this problem in the first place because you had that kind of situation. And of course, in Nick's case as well, your party, I don't know to what extent is successful. But again, because we don't have a framework for, I think an in-depth belief in democracy and how our democracy and our society is structured, there are some issues there. So I want to probably ask the question, how can you, I don't think these issues that we have raised, we can't de-link them from the realities of the Caribbean. So how do we link that, and is that an important thing to consider as we put forward some ideas? And then a few small ones just quickly. One is to Terri-Ann. Maybe you could give some examples or give some examples of where the social audit tool were youth-led and how they are making a difference. I think that would really make a difference to encourage those who don't believe in any tools anymore because they've tried them all. To what extent have any of those 120 young people used the tool and it's making a difference? That would help. And then I would also say, just in terms of the rejuvenation, I would wonder who are the people who are working with young people to help with this rejuvenation? And I want to recommend, since you asked for recommendation, that you should seek for people who are trained properly with youth development as part of their. Don't just pick anybody who are maybe social workers or you just people who just did an engineering degree. Look for people who have youth work as an understanding of that. And I want to put that forward. To what extent are you engaging proper youth work as they are seeking them out and making sure that they are involved in the rejuvenation, particularly around the youth. So those are a few questions I have. I hope we probably could have a discussion.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for all of the questions and comments. We'll just take a few minutes and ask our panelists to respond to the comments if you like, and specifically to the questions that were posed as well. I don't know if you want to go in order. Well, you're sitting.
All right. It goes back to some of the things that were mentioned earlier, that we have to develop a cohort of young people who are inclined to get involved, who are inclined to participate in decision-making processes in our several countries. And it goes back to educational reform. And I think that we need to mainstream citizenship education in our formal school system throughout the entire Caribbean. That, I think, is going to be the foundation for us to have a generation that is going to become involved in the political process, in the decision-making process. You have the 3 C's of citizenship participation, which is civic knowledge, civic skills, and civic dispositions, and that goes back to teaching them about the importance of democracy as a system of governance, and also putting in a practical aspect of that education where they can go out into the communities, where they can get involved in community activities, that they can understand what it means to give back to the community and to become involved in protecting the environment and other things, that we can show our young people what it really means to get involved. We have to reactivate student councils and student guilds in our schools. Those are important ways for young people to learn methods of representation and how they can represent their peers and how they can give voice to the issues that they are affecting them as students. UE in particular has a very strong guild. The Open Campus has a very strong guild. We just elected a guild recently, which I'm a part of. And we have many challenges that we face as open campus students that we have to bring to the fore. But it is that basic knowledge and that foundational education that's the way we're going to build a better Caribbean society where our young people are properly engaged in the decision-making processes. And also the young man spoke about voting, and I can understand the frustration at times among young people who feel that they're voting and they're not seeing the results. But if you do not get involved, if you sit down, if you don't exercise your right, then you really don't have a say. The only way that you have a say in the decision-making processes of your country and governance is by actively taking part in that process and voting. Too many persons, in my opinion, have died and too many persons have suffered to give us the right to vote, and we should not waste it. It's as simple as that. Yes, we have a lot of two-party systems in the Caribbean. St. Vincent is one of them, Jamaica is one of them. But we have to decide as a group of young people that this is the country that we want. And if we get involved, become a member of the political party, become a member of the political hierarchy, change the parties from within. It is possible, it can be done. And I will give you an example, because the New Democratic Party in 2000, lost elections in 2001. The party has always had a youth arm from its inception. From the time the party was created, they had a youth arm. And they've had an active youth arm all the years that they've been in governance. They've been in governance for 17 years up until 2001. Being the president of a youth arm in opposition is not an easy task. You don't have funding, you don't have a lot of things. But what I've learned from my experience is that the more that you engage young people, the more that they are able to become empowered and to influence the policies of the party. The New Democratic Party is highly influenced by young people. Our policies, our programs, our positions are highly influenced by a cohort of young people who are actively involved in decision making. And that is what I think is the difference between a lot of political parties who engage young people only when election time comes around, versus a party that sees that the youth are the future and are investing in a cohort of young people who are going to inform where the party is going. And any political party that actively engages young people on that level is going to be a successful party and is going to be a successful government.
Thank you. Okay, just to say, I'm very glad that the two persons, Camila and Adrian, made the comment about the 2001 incursion, because that actually goes to the very root of what we're speaking about when we say, let us look at supporting the recommendations coming out of this Commission of Inquiry. Because when they had the 2001 incursion, there was actually an inquiry. There were some very strong recommendations, but of course they were not supported in terms of actually having them fully implemented. The idea of restorative justice actually came out of that 2001 inquiry. The idea around strengthening victim support, these are all programs and concepts that came out of that 2001 report on that particular inquiry. So for us, it becomes very critical to ensure that commissions of inquiries aren't talk shops, and that the actual recommendations that are going to be brought forward are supported for implementation. I'm glad you mentioned the issue of counseling, because under the current Commission of Inquiry project that we have, the support to psychosocial counseling and victim support in terms of psychosocial support, therapeutic interventions, plays a big part under that particular component. But of course, under a project, a project has a particular shelf life, and then that's it. However, there are government and civil society entities that can provide these services, and they need to be promoted and institutionalized properly to ensure that they can effectively reach all persons. To the issue that Lane had brought up in terms of ensuring that we actually involve trained youth advocates, that is very much to the fore of our thinking. We have been consulting with I think almost everybody under the sun, right? And of course, as most of you probably know, UNDP does not necessarily implement directly, right? We look for implementing partners. And what's going to be critical to the success of this project will be finding the right implementing partners. And we are looking for youth-driven CBOs, trained, skilled in advocacy, who understand the realities of what is going on with our young people. Right? That is very critical and important to us. And as well, some of the programs that we're looking to facilitate are particularly in relation to counseling, again, youth-specific programs. So addressing some of the ills that would have occurred from a young person growing up in a community where there is a constant barrage of gunshots, nightly, daily, right? That has a long-term effect. And what we're seeing is that it's important to address these long-term effects. Right?
something that we're looking and seeing how we can work around that. I think there was something else that Lane said. I can't read my writing. Okay, yes, there was one more point. I think to your broader question around the socio-economic structure that exists, prevailing structures causing that challenge, I think it becomes very important for us to look at new directions and shifts in terms of how we do business, right? And I think it's only in supporting and encouraging new ideas, new concepts, new groups of young people who are saying, hey, let's not do this way anymore, that is the only way we're going to get any real sort of change going. I think we have to institutionalize the idea that the old way of doing business does not work. And going forward, we need to encourage innovation, and we need to support groups of individuals or groups of young people who are actually doing innovative and transformative things. On Monday, we had our Social Good Summit. And I remember one of the speakers, which for me was, I think, probably one of the most interesting ones, but there were a range of young persons who were using technology and technological innovation. And the young man who basically supported the development of the JUTC app for the bus system in Jamaica. I mean, that's radical. And there are more young people out there who need the support to implement these radical ideas that they have, right? It's not that what we think is difficult sometimes cannot be done. We just need to support persons who have the drive, the dedication, give them the opportunities, give them the access to be able to come up with these new solutions and new pathways. Access to funding, agreed, 100%.
I just want to pick up on the point made by our colleague about the age range. I completely agree with you. For us at SALISES, we speak a lot about development. And when we speak about youth, we speak about young people in development rather than just speaking about youth development, which tends to encourage us to adopt a specific age range and narrow and limit the scope of what we do. We are more interested in changing the world and the societies in which we live, and therefore supporting people generally, and of course young people from birth right through to their death, in making a positive contribution. I think if we start to think about young people in development, a process of development that many stakeholders are involved with, we can sometimes break down some of these, what we consider to be artificial barriers and specific age ranges that we impose upon young people. So I wanted to thank you for that, about needing to have an earlier intervention. Lane context is critical. I highlighted political context, but the other things matter a lot as well, but so does changing context. And we've discussed this before, and changing context takes time, and because of that, with social audit processes, you have to start small. You start small with something that people care about, but it's easy for a small group of people to start to build a certain reputation for doing good work that benefits people, provides them with information. So I'll give you an example. We trained 30 young people in Belize. These were young entrepreneurs and students from all over Belize. And then a group of them, I forget the name of the municipal region where they're from, I forget it now, but they actually organized what they called a rapid assessment of their local government council. They wanted to understand how the council was being run, what they were doing, and so on. And focusing on the capacity, because as far as they were concerned, they felt that local government has a mandate to provide certain services and so on. They were not satisfied with the services, and they felt maybe it's a capacity issue, whether it's financial and so on. They looked at the legal framework, local policies, public policies, public services, transparency and accountability, and citizen participation. And they did a sort of scorecard for things, so that the agency now, what was interesting was that the agency actually began to work with them, because they could use this scorecard and say, well, we're doing well in this area, but we need to move along in this area. So it became a partnership rather than an adversarial thing. Now that's really small. You're talking about just a constituency. In Jamaica, we call it like a parish. of Belize. But that kind of built a reputation of these young people, and they could go on to take on more work. We haven't done it yet. Right now, there's a group of Jamaican young people with other members of civil society planning a social audit initiative in Jamaica. We're hoping we can get that off the ground. So hopefully you can have more examples and build a groundswell. What I didn't present here because of lack of time was my reticence about the possibility of doing a regional social audit. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think the environment is one where we could try that yet. But if we start at community and national levels, maybe eventually we could get there. We could see.
And I hope I respond to your question correctly. You mentioned, you asked the question, is it condition of ensuring forced participation? And I honestly believe so. Just looking back at it historically, if you look at the Caribbean, we've had 300 plus years of slavery and about just probably close to 60 years of democracy. Right? No country in the Caribbean has yet reached 60 years of independence. And essentially, in my belief is that we've kind of inherited, even though we've inherited a democratic system, it's still not fully democratic. One, and then the two-party system we've inherited, while it has done a lot of good, there's been a lot of destruction as well within that. In terms of the specific situation in Barbados, I think government has tried its best to compensate for the years of in which there was no access to social goods and so on. To me, what has also happened is the government has kind of overcompensated in that citizens rely too much on government to deliver the goods. No, government can't deliver the goods. It is forced participation. But at the same time, what has not happened is that there's not been a real engagement of the people, especially the younger people, in teaching them things, why democracy is important, why participation is important. And that has played into the hands of the government in the sense that, okay, I'm going to pull the rug from under you. Right? I consulted with you years ago what policies and so on set up, but now I'm going to pull the rug from under you and not going to tell you anything. So now the rug is pulled in the context of education. Young people are realizing the floor is hard and it's very cold and they don't know how to respond. So I think the solution to that has been what Terri-Ann has presented, what Nick has presented in terms of the social auditing and so on, and what some of the other young people said. We have to teach young people from early. And I always said when I was at UWI, and there was a big distinction between Barbadian students and the students from the rest of the Caribbean, because Barbadian students, even though they understood, they were not plugged in. So even back in 2005-06, it was when they raised the amenities fees. There was one of probably 5 Barbadian students who was actually marching, because it was looking down the road and said, this is going to affect my brother and sister. Asian students didn't care. Now they care, but they are unable to respond. And part of that has been they've been too passive. They've not been engaged in the whole democratic system. So they know what they can.
Thank you so much. Just want to extend a big thank you to everyone who's joined today. If I could just wrap up by mentioning a few takeaway points that have really stuck with me. I would say, first of all, education. Education from an early age, and education not only in academic areas, but in what it means to be a citizen. What are your rights and what are your responsibilities? And educational access that is open to all and that gives everyone, as far as is possible, an equal chance at a quality education that tells them what it means to meaningfully participate from a young age. And I think that education should also extend to the home, but that's a personal responsibility. I would also say capacity. capacity of the persons who are engaging in this type of work. Yes, we must be qualified. We need to do our research. We need to ensure that we actually understand the tools that we're using, but also being able to recognize and harness the capacity of exceptional individuals who show promise. I totally agree with what my friend at the front said, that many times persons with drive, with motivation become overlooked because they're just an individual. Yes, we need to work collectively, but we also need to recognize and harness the capacity of exceptional individuals who have that drive, who can lead and bring others along. I also want to mention context. A few persons touched on that as well. Our socio-economic context, the larger, broader context of the international, global world in which we live. Yes, Caribbean Basin Security Initiative has had a major impact on all of our economies and policies for the last 30 years, our own individual contexts and histories. We recognize that in order to bring more young people into governance, we have to negotiate with these larger, broader systems that, when we look at them, are much larger than any one of us as individual people or individual countries. And I think that moving forward with our recognition and understanding of that context has to inform the way that we engage in governance, the way that we teach young people about governance, and the way that we practice governance. And I would say, I want to close off with a very important statement that my friend here made, which is change from within. We can't expect any of these structures that have been long entrenched to change if we're not acting within those and inside of those. Yes, there are those of us who are the radicals who are not going to step foot into Gordon House and who won't join a political party, and we have to mobilize people on the outside. But I think it's very critical, and it's also very scary and daunting, but we have to face up to the fact that we also have to have people inside, people with this mindset, people who understand what are needed, people who have come from the grassroots, who work with young people, who remember what it's like to be young, who haven't been in politics for the last 75 years, right, but who have an understanding of what it really takes, and who are willing to be political representatives, who are willing to join parties, who are willing to start parties. I mean, many of our countries have two-party systems, but just to use a personal example of Jamaica, if all of the uncommitted voters who are not enumerated, who don't normally vote, if they vote for a different party, we would have a different political leader in Jamaica. So I think change from within is something that we all have to think about, and I just want to thank you all for coming today, for sharing, and please let's keep the conversation going, all right? Thank you so much. Please give our panelists and yourselves a big round of applause.